Thank you so much for doing this, by the way. I really, really appreciate it. My colleague Andrew could not join us. He has a work conflict, but yeah, we've been revisiting one of our favorite childhood series, Family Matters, for the past couple of years. We just finished recapping season 2 and talking to a lot of people that have worked on the show. You know, Rich Carell and Gary Goodrich included. So we decided to just, further add on to the pile of important creative voices in the show. And obviously, you being the co-creator, you were a pretty important voice we wanted to talk to. So I'm really appreciative of your time.
Well, I got nothing to do at 8:30 this morning.
Yeah.
So no, I'm happy to talk to you, and yeah, and you've talked to some really good people I've worked with on a lot of things.
Yeah, and I look forward to this conversation as well. So I am just stunned by your IMDb bill. Would you like to be called Bill or William?
Bill, and IMDb has maybe 5% of what I've actually done.
Oh wow.
It's everybody think that's the epitome of you can find out everything, that they don't know what they're doing. So it's I've even been credited as an actor in got a movie, and it was a movie that came out in the 60s when I was like a teenager still. And it's a middle-aged man, but it still shows up on my resume as being an actor in a movie that I was watching, during the summers in high school and stuff. So anyway, I appreciate your reaction.
Do you remember what the movie was called, or who was acting alongside with you, or writing and directing the movie? And like the movie that you're talking about in the '60s, do you remember like what the name was?
His name is similar. It's just, I think his name might actually be Bickley. I've forgotten now. But, in fact, when I was producing The Love Boat, um, I got an invitation to Rock Hudson's private memorial at his house.
Wow.
Rock was doing a series. It was a spelling thing, and Rock was doing a series on the same lot as us. And I thought, well, and it's from Elizabeth Taylor. And I'm thinking, I don't actually know Elizabeth Taylor. I didn't know my cousin. Wow. And I realized that I think that same actor was working on the lot, and they just got us mixed up. And I was really tempted to just like go instead,
Yeah.
but I couldn't do that. I couldn't lie for that long.
I totally understand that. But yeah, I mean, not just as you mentioned, working on the Love Boat, but in addition, obviously, to your work on the TGIF shows like Step by Step, Family Matters, Perfect Strangers. I see credits for All in the Family, the Partridge Family, Joni Loves Chachi, Happy Days. I mean, you've been all around the biggest shows on television from back in the day. And if you don't mind, I would just like to go to the beginning and start with like what got you interested into television writing and producing in the first place.
Well, in terms of of comedy, which leads to television, I get the foundation for that is similar to most comedy writers, which was a horrendous childhood. You got it. You either, because I grew up in the South, I was a hell of a good shot when I was 7 years old. So I look back and sometimes think, with my childhood, I either could grow up to climb a clock tower with a rifle, or be a comedy writer. Those were the choices. I think I chose comedy, and I chose comedy because when I was growing up, when I was a child, television was just coming in, and not everybody had television. We were divided up between the poor kids and the rich kids. The rich kids were the ones that had televisions. That was the defining quality. And so I remember the day I came home from school, maybe first grade or something, and my father had actually gotten a television that was sitting there, and then all the furniture had been arranged to face this television. So that became life. It was very much the 50s of a lot of living room furniture was arranged to face the television set. So I grew up on just constant television whenever I could get to it. I even before we got a television set, I used to make up stories. I used to lie and say, "Yeah, we have a television." So I would make up episodes of Dragnet and say, "Yeah, Dragnet last," and I would describe. But I just making up stories. Dragnet wasn't hard to make up stories for. Some bad guy did something, and these two guys, and they catch him and hit him on the head, and then so. The kids I was lying to didn't know they didn't have television either. It was in my formation, television. Um, so from a young age, all I wanted to do was make that the stories that were in my head because I lived in my imagination. Um, I was making up stories. So I by the age of 10 or 11, I knew what I wanted to do was uh, be a writer and write for television, and I never wanted to do anything else. I don't know what I would have done if I had not at least succeeded in doing that as an occupation. I really don't know what I would have done. Bodyguard, maybe if I because again, the gun thing.
And that's the perfect mindset. I mean, you hear often with people who get into show business because, I mean, it's so unpredictable. You don't know where your next paycheck is coming from. The people that are usually in it are the people that feel destined to do it. And if you have that, that form of destiny, that form of high confidence, it really gets you to places. So tell me, how did you go from saying, all right, I want to, how did you go from I want to do television to actually getting your foot in the door to television? What was that?
And whenever I've taught a writing class, I say, I'm going to tell you how I got started. It will have nothing to do with the way you get started. Everybody's path is different.
Right.
When I was in college and as an English major, and I knew I wanted to be a writer and all that. So I was writing short stories and stuff that were getting published in the university magazine. I started a correspondence with a guy who was a television writer and then later a producer, and just carried in this communication by letter, and I would send him the stories I wrote and stuff like that. Um, so when I graduated from college in 1969, it was the middle of the Vietnam War, and we all had been told, "You're going to get drafted. You're going to graduate. You're going to get a letter. You're going to do the physical. You're going to Vietnam."
Yeah.
So I signed up. I uh, uh, signed up to become a naval aviator because I didn't like camping, and you go on the ground, it's hot and dirty. But in a jet, you get shot down, it's sort of pretty much over. You don't have to get dirty or anything. But right out of that, um, uh, and I sort of escaped miraculously out of I was in the pipeline to go to Vietnam. I went straight out to California, where this guy named Arnold Margolin was by then an executive producer of a show called Love American Style.
Hmm.
And he gave me a chance to come up with some stories, of which I did, and they liked one of them. One of the key things in the spring of 1970, when I was doing this, was the Writers Guild was threatening a strike. When the Writers Guild might strike, all the studios, and that's all that we were back that studio, there was no internet stuff. They start baking scripts so that when the writers strike, they can keep shooting and the writers can get poor. Um, so they were just in a hurry. So they liked my story idea, uh, and they figured, well, if this kid screws it up, we can always fix it because he liked the story. So that because of that pressure, they gave me a chance. I'm not sure they would have. Uh, what's his name was a monkey, Davy Jones. Davy Jones was a monkey, and then I've forgotten the actors now. It was where a guy going to elope with his girlfriend gets the wrong house and climbs in the wrong window. and he just is a total screw up, and he explains this to this stranger whose room he's invaded. And so it's kind of a like, you can tell they're going to fall in love now. And that girl was wrong with him. And I had to do all that in a 12-minute script. But back then, I guess it was easier. So I had my first episode of Love American Style, and then they liked the script. So they immediately hired me to do another one. And at Paramount in those days, in this one building, there were on a hallway on the second floor, there were, I think, 3 television shows in that one hallway, the producer, writer. Word got down the hall because I was just 23 years old. And in the 70s, that made you a genius. If you could just write, he can make up words. So he must be a genius because he's 23. So the next show down the hall from Love American Style, a show called Barefoot in the Park, which was an African-American version of Barefoot in the Park. And so they heard about me. So they immediately hired me to write some scripts. And then at the end of the hall was The Odd Couple and Garry Marshall, who was the maven of Paramount sitcom then. And he brought me in one day because they were shooting my scripts, and I was having my script shot without any rewriting, which was, I didn't know it then, but it was unheard of. And so he brought me into his office, and he said, that script they're shooting and they're calling you to say that is fantastic, and you're a genius, right? And he said, that script, it's not bad, right? And I said, well, how will I learn? And he said, I'll teach you. And so that's how Garry Marshall became my mentor, and that was about 6 weeks after I had arrived in LA.
Wow.
That's tell the classes, don't start thinking it's going to happen that fast. But
yeah, everybody's journey is different. I mean, things happened pretty quickly for you.
And there's always some quirk of fate and you have to be ready for it. You have to, it's not like then it's just automatic. You get an opportunity. It comes out of left field. And then what you do with that opportunity, I guess, makes a difference.
And Garry Marshall played a creative role in Happy Days as well.
We created Happy Days. So he became my mentor.
What did you learn from Garry Marshall that anybody could say, okay, that is the Garry Marshall way of teaching the comedy?
Well, he taught me a lot about writing, obviously, through giving me painful criticism, which is indispensable. If you want to be a writer or any creative thing, you want to have somebody that will tell you the truth, no matter how much it hurts. And he would do that. And but what's most memorable to me was not so much his writing advice, although it was vitally important, but when he decided to hand Happy Days off to a showrunner that was 26 years old and had never been a showrunner, which was me. One of the most important things he said, which it has gotten me through all these years, which was, Bill, the most important thing is don't fall down. And it was because being a showrunner, and Happy Days was a one-camera show. We shot it like a movie, and it was
really.
Yeah, because the network put it on the air because American Graffiti had been a hit the previous summer. That's how it got on the air.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all the networks wanted to do a 50s show. Well, so the network and studio said, yeah, give us American Graffiti in 3 days for each episode. So it's like, it was impossible. It was under budgeted. Nobody thought it would work. And that's, I believe, the foundational reason that the network approved me as the showrunner of that show for the first 2 seasons when it was one camera. They didn't think it was going to work anyway. So why not hire the kid?
So I think you're kind of blowing my mind, because from what I know, sitcoms with a live studio audience are usually multi-camera. So how did the single camera concept work, especially in terms of the hours. Because from what I know of single camera shows, I mean, you could be doing like 12, 13-hour days. Whereas with a multi camera sitcom, probably because you have like 3 or 4 cameras, you could have rehearsals in like 5 or 6 hours and go home in the middle of the afternoon. So how did that affect the workday having a single camera sitcom as opposed to a multi?
You're absolutely right. Everything you said is true.
Yeah.
Uh, how did it affect the workday? There was no difference between day and night. I mean, it was a 20-hour a day job.
Wow.
Because I had to be on set almost all the time during the day. Every time they would set up for a new scene, then I had to go to editing, and to go to casting, and then when we wrapped at night, and sometimes we shot at night, so we wouldn't wrap till 9 or 10. But even when we wrapped at 7 p.m., right before we went into golden time, then I would spend several hours rewriting the script or the materials for the next day. It was a killer, and it was very hard to do that. One of the and it was one of the reasons the show switched to a multi-camera audience. Now, one has to know that in the '60s, leading up to this, because this was December 1973 was when we started Happy Days. Well, up until the '70s, most half-hour comedies, or all television shows, with the exception of Lucy and some of those, were one single camera shows.
Yeah.
And I have been associate producer of Room 222, and then the head writer for The Partridge Family. All of those shows were one camera shows. And so that tradition was now giving way to the multi-camera shows. Or Tyler Moore, All in the Family, which I did one of the first 13 of All in the Family.
Yeah.
Because nobody's thought that show would work. So there's a kid over here. Yeah, okay, fine. So it was just changing over. Happy Days was a one camera show, I think, primarily because they were trying to do American Graffiti,
Yeah, the
which
movie with George Lucas. Yeah.
the nature of that show was cars and drive-ins and night and all this '50s stuff, and
Yeah.
so that seemed the best way to do that type of show. And then after 2 seasons, Garry said, "Well, screw this. Let's shoot
Uh-huh.
audience." And also, Garry hadn't been able to be involved very much the first 2 seasons. He was busy with The Odd Couple, so they
Right.
kind of threw it in my lap. And there were tons of fights with the networks and all that. But at any rate, uh, the change in the third season was primarily, I think, because it's cheaper to do it multi-camera than one single camera, and it's it doesn't kill the producers and writers.
I bet. I bet.
It can be killed by the cast. That's one of the risks of multi-camera.
And I believe Happy Days ran 10, 11 years.
11 years.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think a parallel between Happy Days and the show you would eventually co-create with Michael Warren, Family Matters, um, what became the breakout character, the Fonz, Henry Winkler, just like Steve Urkel, was he originally supposed to be like a one-time guest shot and then became the star of the show over time? Is that the parallel?
Yeah, and in the same way, Henry Fonzie on Happy Days was not intended to be a terribly important character at the beginning. You sort of see him, and then at the end, Gary's idea was at the end, and Fonzie, who almost never speaks, at the end he'll say something that brings everything together. And I said at one point, I said, "Garry, Neil Simon couldn't write that. We're not that smart. We can't think of something at the end will suddenly one line will bring things together. We can't do that." And at the same time, Henry brought Fonzie alive
Right.
and became more and more important. So very quickly, a lot of stories centered on Henry. But at the beginning, that wasn't the idea. Well, his popularity grew. So he was the first that I know of so-called breakout character.
Mm.
incidental member of the cast suddenly becomes the star in the shows about it. I'm not saying that never happened. I don't know when that had happened before, but then eventually through the years, network started asking who's the breakout character. Well, breakout characters, there's a reason they're called breakout characters, because they break out from a pack. No one knows. No one predicts it. It's unpredictable. Networks love to predict everything. So with Family Matters, and I'm sure you know the backstory of that. Family Matters was just the family and what you see. Then simply because Michael and I are, of course, running the show, and we needed television production moves fast, and a lot of times it moves faster than you can come up with scripts. So you find yourself in the middle of the night saying, "Holy shit, what are we going to shoot next week?"
Yeah.
And it's Friday. We'll need a script by Monday.
Yeah.
And so we got in a pinch about halfway through the season. We had run out of scripts, and Michael and I said, we need to come up with a script over the weekend. So we had done a pilot, and I'm not even going to say which network because they may sue. We had done a pilot a couple of years earlier that was about a family. It was a white family. And it was about the father worries that his adolescent daughter won't get a date to her first, boy-girl dance or something. And so he rigs a date with a friend of his who has a son. He's never met the son, and it turns out to be the worst date choice it could possibly be. So in that script, what we said, okay, we need to write a character that is instantly nobody's idea for the date this girl would want. And so we wrote the character of Steve Urkel, which was named after a friend of Michael Warren's. And he hated us later on, but so it was just meant to, it was the episode that was going to keep us shooting, not intended to stick around. Had Jaleel White not walked in and made that character, it would have been one time and gone.
Right.
But Jaleel White showed up. And I wasn't even in the casting session. It was incidental casting, and so I didn't need to be there. So we had the cast reading on that Monday morning or whenever it was, and Jaleel White, he's 12 years old, I think, at the time. He blew us away. This little kid just knocked everybody out. So instantly we got together and said, okay, we need to add this kid to the show. And suddenly there was Steve Urkel. And breakout characters are wonderful accidents. So much of what makes a show work are wonderful accidents. And that was one of them.
So looking back, I wonder if long term, if you find it easier to write for a show with the concept of breakout character and then the rest of the cast, or can it be more sustainable to write a show with like ensemble cast? Because when I think just ensemble cast, I think Mary Tyler Moore Show, All in the Family, where sometimes you can't even really detect who the breakout person of the show is. Like each member of the cast adds their own flavor. So yeah, in 9 years of writing and producing Family Matters with that idea of Steve Urkel's the breakout, let's write primarily around him. What did that become consistently fulfilling throughout 9 seasons, or were there moments where it was just like, oh man, like we gotta kind of take a break and maybe push him back a little bit, maybe there's overexposure? Like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think sometimes people think a television series, we plan it all out.
Oh,
We know what we're doing. We don't really know what we're doing. None of us really do. So we're always trying to figure it out as we go. Every pilot you have, especially if if you're going to cast a known actor or something like that, you're focusing on the star. Or even in a gang show, Friends or something like that, you probably start with particular actors that that's going to be the focus primarily, and then it's not until the show is underway in production that every pilot is essentially a first draft. And I don't care how many times you rewrite it, you don't know what a show is until minimally halfway through the first season. It's like an out of town doing a play out of town to try to figure out what the play is and fix it before you go to New York. Well, on TV, you take this rough draft and you aren't quite sure it's going to work, and you're guessing the best you can, and then it gets on the air, and then you hope you stay on long enough to figure out what the show is. That's pretty much every television show. Same with Happy Days, of course, which everybody thought was a failure anyway. And with Family Matters, even Perfect Strangers started out, got on the air, and the first thing the network wanted us to do was replace one of the leads, which it turned out to be a wonderful thing because we got to work with Mark Lynn-Baker, who is a comedy genius, and him paired with Bronson Pinchot. The two of them together was that amazing chemical formula. All of a sudden, these two actors feed off each other. Well, and that's what you hope for in a television show. You hope to figure out the show, and you'll always be surprised as to which characters sort of step forward in terms of attention and focus and interest. It's all guesswork anyway.
Right. Speaking of Perfect Strangers, let's talk about that. That's the predecessor to Family Matters. Of course, it's about a Chicagoan and an immigrant from another country and their roommates and their dynamic throughout the 8 seasons of the show. Can you talk about the genesis of how that came into your lap? Because that pretty much starts your relationship with what we know as ABC, TJIF,
Right.
the com brand.
Yeah, and of course, Perfect Strangers started out on a Tuesday night, and I think after the first, I don't remember, first few episodes, ABC was moving stuff around, and that's when they sort of said, "Well, we'll put all these shows on Friday night, and we'll call it TGIF." And they don't know what they're doing either. And as I recall, Perfect Strangers was the lead out on Friday night in the beginning. Um, and then it was switched around. So Full House led the night. And so anyway, the concept of putting these four shows together, Perfect Strangers was in that mix. And of course, Perfect Strangers led to the Family Matters.
Yeah. And so yeah, if you can talk about like your role on that show, what it was like writing and producing that, and how that led to coming up with the character of Harriet Winslow, because of course that's what kicks off Family Matters.
Well, of course, first of all, Perfect Strangers was created by a terrific writer who's passed on now and was a good friend of mine named Dale McCraven. So Michael and I were brought in when they were shooting the pilot with the idea of us running the show, and we eventually ran the show. I mean, we did from the beginning. And as what happens so often, when the show took off, we started adding some characters. And we switched Balky's workplace to a newspaper. And then I believe it was Bob Boyette that said, let's add an elevator operator. It's a black woman's an elevator operator. We said, Bob, they don't have elevator operators anymore. I think you're lost in the wrong dimension. But he said, oh yeah, it'll be an old elevator and everything. So come up with we started looking for casting, eventually found Joe Marie. Basically a wisecracking elevator operator. Right? Then Well, the Bruce Willis movie that
Yeah, Die Hard. That's how you found Reginald Val Johnson to play
so maybe I might
husband.
forget what's so that's how we suddenly saw an actor on that show that was terrific. So
Were you? But can I ask if you were there for Joe Marie Payne's audition for Harriet? Like, what made her
yeah,
stand
yeah,
out?
well, no, that was I was definitely there for those auditions.
What made her
And
stand out from the
she
rest?
was far and away the better one that auditioned. So that was an easy casting choice. Um, and
Do you,
and
do,
again,
do,
the person
do you
tended to be a big character. Say again.
no, no. Do you remember how many people auditioned for Harriet and what made Joe Marie stand out among the rest?
Well, um, there's a screening process before the show running producers ever see an actor audition. So it had been narrowed down a bit. Uh, and oddly, more often than not in a casting process, it's it's not a tough choice. It's there could be several actors that do good, they're fine, and then there tends to be one character that comes in and it's their audition is heightened in some way. Usually
Right.
something they bring to it because when we create new characters, again, talk about first draft level, we don't know yet what the character is. So the actor has to sort of figure out how they see it. And so Joe Marie came in with a sort of an attitude, a way of doing it that it was very clearly the best choice. Of course, the network objected to it because she did well, and they thought, well, if she does well, then maybe we should hire something. I won't even get it. The network actually objected at the beginning. And we said, she's the only one that made us laugh. Okay. And then after a couple of weeks of negotiating, we got Joe Marie. So now we had Joe Marie in the cast, but just for little bits in the show.
So, for those little bits, what made the writing staff, you included, think, okay, like let's add on to this. Let's give her a husband to work with.
Had no thought of Joe Marie in terms of doing a spinoff series at that point.
No. I mean, in the guest role of Perfect Strangers, like when her and Reginald Val Johnson
And
worked.
yeah, no, we wanted to find a show to do with Reggie, and so we wanted the network wanted a black family, sort of not a counter to the Cosby Show, but more middle class than Cosby, which had been, of course, a phenomenal hit. And so we got these two white guys, guys that really understand it, and said, give us the black family. So our focus was on Reggie, and um, we we decided to do a cheap pilot, which was just a short presentation, not a full half hour. We'll do it as a spinoff. That was happening in those days, and um, and we thought, oh, we got Joe Marie, and we could give up Joe Marie because mostly she had to speak inside from elevators doors. She was like tied to the elevator, and so it's like, well, we
Yeah.
already have Joe Marie here, and we bring Reggie in as the father, and now all we have to do is figure out what a family is. So that was the genesis of that. So we built off, okay, it's Reggie and it's Joe Marie, and now who are their kids and what's the family like and so forth.
So as I take it, Reggie and Joe Marie were doing well. They had a great dynamic on Perfect Strangers when they were guesting, and from that, you guys wanted to make the building blocks
Yeah,
to.
and Joe Marie was a regular.
Oh, he was.
Yeah,
Okay.
on,
Gotcha.
on Perfect Strangers.
Right. And then once Reggie came to guest star, because he guest starred on Perfect Strangers, like
Right.
there was something about that chemistry that made you guys say, okay, that is a great building block.
Well, it was no, we discovered Reggie Bell Johnson in the movie. We knew we wanted to do a pilot with him. So we had him, we did it by having him guest on Perfect Strangers, but we always had in mind we're going to pair up Reggie and Joe Marie and do this pilot.
So can I ask, because I feel like at that time there was a pretty big distinction between movie and TV stars. Like there was this impression that like movie star, like if you're in a movie, that's grand, and if you're in a TV show as compared to a movie, that's a little bit beneath you. So I guess I'm curious as to what made Reggie feel content and okay with going from Die Hard to being what was considered at the time beneath a movie, a network television sitcom. Like, was he just looking for work? Was he like what was the conversation around that, if I may ask?
Uh, when you ask Reggie that, let me know what his answer was. Uh, you know, not everybody who shows up in a movie is guaranteed to be flooded with movie script.
Right, right,
Reggie was a breakout character in Die Hard.
right,
And hardly the focus, but again, well, so was Bronson.
right,
I mean, not in Die Hard, but in another movie. Uh, so it's not always, okay, now you're a movie star, and why would you want to do? You're in between. Now, if Reggie had been the star of whatever movie it was, it might have worked out the same way you're saying, because you're absolutely right about the uh, feeling that television is beneath the movie star. Um, so Reggie was in the in between, and he might have gotten other kind of character parts in movies. So far as I know, it
right.
wasn't like being flooded with great movie scripts. So it was an opportunity. Let's face it, all actors. The hardest thing for an actor to do is get a job.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, it's a harsh career being an actor. And, well, heck, a series that's where he's the star versus waiting around for them to cast the next, hey, that black guy, he was kind of funny. And
yeah.
a sidekick in a movie or something like that. So it wasn't like a big choice in that regard. And, but
So
we
now
loved
that
Reggie in that movie.
right. So that actually brings me to my next question. Like you're talking about, like when Reggie is led to believe that he's the going to be the star of this TV series. So, um, like when that conversation happens with Reggie as for starring on Family Matters, is it okay, Reggie? Like you're going to be the lead star and everybody's going to be supporting, or are you and Joe Marie going to share like star billing and then it's the rest of the family? I wonder what that conversation with Reggie was like because I know certainly once Jaleel really takes off in season 2 as Steve Urkel, that there were some, Gary Goodrich, as a matter of fact,
Disturbance? Yes.
I believe that Reggie had some tensions about that.
Yes, yes, and almost all actors, even Ron Howard is truly the nicest person in show business.
Yeah. Yes.
But when Fonzie became the breakout and it was all Fonzie, 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 it was in the third season, and I wasn't the showrunner anymore. I wasn't associated with the show in the third season, and he came out to my house and was really bothered by the fact that it had been his show, and now all of a sudden it was Henry's show. And he's a nice guy. He had nothing against Henry or anything like that. It's that experience of you think, oh, I'm starring in a TV show, and then it works, it gets picked up
Right.
and so forth. And then all of a sudden, wait a second, a secondary character is suddenly not about my character anymore, although he was vital to it. So it's just a blow. So
Yeah.
in Ron's case, he was just trying to deal with it, not to do anything to disrupt it or anything. He understood it, but he needed to get through that. Well, it's a gut punch for any actor when they see a show as they're the star of it, and Reggie was. Um, when all of a sudden it shifts, and with Urkel, it shifted all of a sudden, and right in the middle of the first season. So all of a sudden, and let's face it, it's a 12-year-old kid. That's all of a sudden the show's focus moves all. So it's a tough thing to take. So yeah, Reggie had some went through the same thing that Ron did, and had experienced disappointment. Um, we did make the argument trying to help him deal with it. You can remain the focus, and maybe the show will go another half a season, or you can let this happen and have the show run long enough so that you have enough money to never work again. That's the reality of it. And but I think Reggie was fine with it after a while. Every once in a while, he sort of like it ruffled his feathers. But I always felt like, because I was always the one that had to talk to Reggie or the cast when there was conflict. So I always felt like Reggie ultimately handled it as well as anybody I've known.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that you've already dealt with the situation with Ron Howard and Happy Days going into the tensions with Reggie on Family Matters. And it sounds like the best way to deal with those tense conversations is to give the actor the options. Is, okay, you could either have this or you could have that. And Reggie, like almost any actor, chose to work and get a steady paycheck. Now, Carl Winslow is considered one of the most beloved TV sitcom dads to this day. So it definitely worked out in the end for him.
Actually, from a show's point of view, the show didn't just become about Urkel. I think the show was about Reggie and Urkel. It was about the father and this kid. It's like Dennis the Menace, the old show. This kid that it lives in their house. That's why you never went to Steve Urkel's parents' house. It was always the invader. Well, that brought in a conflict that Reggie was perfect for. Oh, God, is that kid again? Which actually gave us a conflict, which you have to have for comedy, that really heightened the comedy in the show. So, quite frankly, it helped Reggie's character to have the conflict with this kid that invaded his space.
I love that. And speaking of which, bouncing off of that, like in just the first two seasons of the show, me and my co-host Andrew, we've noticed that there was a reoccurrence of episodes centered around, Steve and Carl's dynamic, Steve and Eddie's dynamic, Carl and Eddie's dynamic, Steve and Laura's dynamic. And I wonder if those decisions to like really like keep coming back to those dynamics, is it just like a studio audience reaction? Is it outside research? Like, is it just your own intuition as writers? Like you just enjoy it and you just want to keep going with it? Like what goes into like, repetition of those dynamics during the course of the 9 season run of the show?
Well, it's a careful science. It's guesswork. Well, since you're shooting in front of a live audience, you do get to see how the audience responds to a character.
Yeah.
And and by the way, with the addition of Steve Urkel, the ratings actually showed almost immediately the ratings improved. So that was undeniable. When you start dealing with other characters and making actors semi-regulars, it's usually because one is our reaction. Writers and producers, Dave Duplin was running the show by the second season, I believe, and Dave was really the heart of. Well, he was the comedy of Family Matters. He took it his own way. I was the heart of it because I wanted to preserve certain qualities in the characters, no matter what they did. But but the other say it.
No. Can I ask what those qualities were? Like, what specific qualities did you want to maintain?
I specifically said the most important thing on the show, it cannot change, is Steve Urkel is a mouse with the heart of a lion. He was given a small, weak body, but he has the heart of a knight of the round table. And he would stand up for what's right, no matter what threat it was to him. That was the true nature of Steve Urkel. He wasn't just some silly kid. This was a hero in a non-hero's body. And I insisted on that. It's not like anybody objected or anything to that, but I wanted that to be clear.
Wow. I'm always curious. Yeah. So I'm curious about how television production works when you started from scratch. So you're given a TV series like Family Matters, and what comes first, what comes after, that's what I'm interested in. So for example, like, was the very first thing decided as far as Family Matters, all right, it's going to star Reggie and Joe Marie, and then what happens after that? Like, we hire writers, we hire costume designers, like what are
Michael and I were the writers, so there were no other writers that, in terms of creating the series. You'd say, okay, Michael and I went off and said, "Who's the family?" It's okay. What? They're Reggie and Joe Marie. Uh, we need to make a family, and there are a couple of things that go into them. One is you can sort of see the basics of a family, the element. They're going to be kids. The kids are not going to have the same personalities. Go go check out any family on earth. Kids are different. All right. All right. There's always conflict. So you look for how the differences create conflict and so forth. And also casting sometimes helps define that as well. With Darius McCrary, he had done that movie, Gene Hackman movie, about the South. I'm losing that. But he had, it'll come back to me tomorrow. But as a little kid, he had done this very serious movie about Jim Crow South and the killing of civil rights workers in Mississippi. And oh man, what a killer actor this kid was. So
yeah.
that actually defined, oh, we just want this kid in the show. And so we said, okay, who is he now? Because I think when the show started, he was he and Jaleel, I think, are the same age, but but we made him the older. Well, Jaleel was in the family. We said, okay, with the age now, he's the older brother, and we said, well, who is he? And began to define what his personality was. And with the
ask it, like, what about that dramatic portrayal that Darius did in that movie that made you think, okay, like, there's something about this kid that could work in a sitcom, which is a totally different tone? Was it something in his audition, or was it just kind of an instinct when you saw that
well,
dramatic movie?
I never delineated between serious actors and comedy actors. I think a comedy character, the worst thing that can happen is that you tell an actor that they're doing a comedy, all of a sudden they think, well, I need to be funny now. That's not funny. It's funny. Archie Bunker, Carol O'Connor, very serious actor, very serious man, great actor. He wasn't saying Archie was a funny guy. He's saying Archie is a racist and is firmly convinced he's. So Carol played that full on. Well, and in context and in conflict, you find the comedy. So what you want first is a good actor. And then it really is dependent on the writing and the story creation, the conflict creation that makes it funny. So the last thing I look for is a jokester, a guy that just would make you funny. And so that never crossed our minds. Well, now see, we knew Reggie was going to be funny. Well, in Die Hard, he wasn't playing comedy, but he got comedy out of it. And so our first thought with any casting in a comedy show is as good an actor as we could possibly find. And so never crossed our mind whether Darius could do comedy or any of the rest of the cast. As the initial cast I'm talking about, we try to cast the best actors we can find and trust that given the story and the dialogue, comedy characters are just characters that take themselves seriously. It's like human beings do. We make fools of ourselves all the time. How hard could it be? So anyway, that was the standard with casting Kelly and Darius.
So can we talk about the casting of Thelma Hopkins as Aunt Rachel and Rosetta Lenoir as Carl's mother, Mother Winslow. What led to those casting choices? I know that Rosetta has a very respected.
Rosetta was added for a lot of reasons, but most importantly because she's Rosetta. So it was like there was no casting alternatives. If like, and I say Bob always wanted uh, a grandmother type, an older woman in that show. And it was a good addition. Rosetta, it was the voice of age, the wisdom of being on the planet, and especially of being a grandmother, which also always feels a little wiser. So that was a good dynamic, and there was no argument about that. Uh, uh,
Can I ask, because I know from the pilot episode where Carl's mother is moving in, and there's that classic tension of like, oh my god, my mom's living in my home as an adult, and then she has that mother-in-law dynamic with Harriet that's a little bit tense here and there. Was it originally thought of that we were going to, like, you know go further into that dynamic? Because it's interesting how, like, the first episode would make you think that Mother Winslow would be just like this big central part of the Winslow home, and then as each episode goes on in the first season, she just gradually becomes more of a background supporting character. So was it originally envisioned that Mother Winslow's dynamic with the rest of the family was going to be like a big focus of the show?
and again, when you create a television show, you're guessing at what where the dynamics will go. So yeah,
Right,
that was part of our thinking. We never saw her as a again, without conflict, you can't do comedy. Well, you can't do drama either, for that matter.
right.
But we always saw her conflict as a very wise conflict. And of course, one of the most irritants when we human beings are trying to live our life is somebody that tells us the truth. That's no fun. Therefore, her wisdom would always create a certain level of conflict in either Joe Marie or Reggie, simply because the truth teller is never appreciated until you get to the resolution and you realize, oh yeah, well they were right. So yeah, it was a dynamic we thought would have more to do with the series because again, we're guessing where's the conflict going to come from. Parent child,
Right.
we know that it's sort of standard. How can we make that a little different? And I do believe it was Bob's idea to add Rosetta. And again, there was no objection to it because it offered another complication. Complications, you want as many complications that are not contradictory as possible when you create any show. And so it was a good dynamic for the structure of the show. And yeah, and then it bounces out. You find what works and you go toward that.
What about the role of Selma Hopkins as Rachel? Because what me and my co-hosts have found going into this rewatch is that Thelma, going into this show in 1989, already has quite the resume with Tony, Orlando, and Dawn. She already did some acting work with, like, the sitcom Give Me a Break. So was there any conversation that revolved around Thelma being a big part of the star billing with Reggie and Joe Marie? Because, like, if you look at the end of the opening credits where it's like Thelma Hopkins as Rachel, they usually have that kind of credit for somebody who is big in stardom. So I'm wondering if there was any original concept or focus about, like, Thelma Hopkins is this big star going into the show. Let's see if she might become a focal point.
Well, here's how many times have I said, now here's the thing.
Sorry,
And what follows, but whenever I say here's the thing, what follows is usually we're not as smart as you think we are. um, I don't remember. Maybe Bob and Tom just really, really, really liked Helma. And she'd been, singing star and stuff.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes when you're doing designing a television show, you'll add stuff that you think might heighten the show in some way, and so you get a little greedy in terms of possibility. Well, the thing is, we all really liked Thelma. Uh, she, and I'd later I did another series with Thelma off that Thelma and Cindy Williams. And but I just love working with Thelma. She's just a terrific person. Whoever came up with, oh, let's add Thelma Hopkins. Probably Michael and I said that's too many characters because we're thinking as writers and producers, and Tom and Bob are thinking, how can we get as much attention? So so probably Tom or Bob said, let's add Thelma, and we probably said as what, and so, but again, we like Thelma, and I think Thelma is tremendously talented. So we sort of compromised again and said, okay, we'll add this other, and you're and as writer and producers, Michael and I were always wary of overpopulating a show, and it's a tendency with the network. It's always a tendency, uh, and so we probably resisted overpopulating. But again, we liked Thelma, and we thought, well, she adds Thelma to the show, so put that character in there. The guy that I think is more responsible than anyone for the longevity of Family Matters is Dave Duclon. He took it in a direction I would not have taken it in. He heightened it into, and I don't mean this derogatorily, a cartoon, and went places I'm too realistic to let my imagination go to outer space, literally. And he, but God, he loved that show, and he brought so much to that show. Again, I remain okay. Give me Steve Urkel's heart. Don't violate that, and you can send him to outer space, or you can turn him into a woman, or anything you want, because and all those things were because Jaleel was so amazingly good. So, like I say, we're always finding our way as a series, especially as the series goes past the third season. Because after the third season, it's like, wait a minute, who are they now? How do how do you grow characters? Now, with kids, you can say, well, now they're in high school. Well, now they're, but with adults, you have to say, okay, if they were real people, what are they dealing with now? What are their problems? What's how how growing the characters simply doesn't mean they necessarily grow in a positive way, but how are they changing? And the third season, you come face to face, and yeah, after the third season, you run out of stories if you aren't thinking that way. It's just like, duh, we did the new car show. We did the fixing the plumbing show. And that's a sign you're not actually growing your characters. You're just trying to think of funny things for them to do, which will kill it. But
do you think some of the sci-fi fantasy elements that the show has done with Urkel in the later seasons, do you think that became sort of a handicap to the character's growth, or do you think
no, actually, again, when I say I would not have taken the show that way, it's about my limitations. And what Dave Duclon brought was because he loved the, I want to say cartoon again, but the fantasy of the thing. So he was willing to break through the reality that that was trying to go for the show in the first couple of years. Um, and I think he did it without destroying the characters, because that's what can happen is they suddenly are not real people anymore. And if characters aren't real people, I don't know what to do with them.
right? Can I ask the balance between the comedic moments and the dramatic elements of the show? Like, for example, just completing our season 2 rewatch on our podcast, we noticed that a big chunk of season 2, very light, very fun sitcom stuff, and then we get into the last 4 or 5 episodes of the season, where it suddenly becomes very heavy. We have episodes about Laura being called the N-word at school, Harriet and Rachel seeing their father for the first time in many years, Carl being traumatized by a like innocent bystander being shot when he could have done something more or felt like he could have done something. So what goes into the decision to make those very dramatic episodes? Is it more like you want to like balance out content? Is it because it's the end of the season and you guys are kind of fresh out of comedic ideas and you just kind of want to like drama? Like what goes into that?
Well, we're often out of fresh comedic ideas, but um, I think, and especially with a show like that, to a certain extent, the show was becoming bigger than life, more unrealistic, and the Steve Urkel, the great scientist, all that stuff. But also there's, I think, a sense of healthy guilt where, uh, and I think especially with a show that's about an African American family. I know even when they first asked me to, Michael and I, to do that, uh, I, I said something along the lines of, "You see me, right? I did not grow up black. I don't know what that's like. I know what growing up is like. I know what parents and so I know aspects of that, but I don't want to do this show and get it wrong. I don't want to do a show and think, well, I just know what all that's about." So in that particular show, it's like to a certain extent, we're avoiding reality more and more.
Mm.
On the other hand, I think all of us, none of us wanted to avoid the Black experience of surviving and growing up in America.
Right, right.
I didn't want to pretend, well, none of that ever happens to them. And I say I was not the only one. Everybody was in agreement about that, except the network. Networks were a big fight. So I think they were saying, we have an obligation here. Like even things like the show about the quilt, which was, again, one of the things I said to the cast from the beginning, and this was before Duke Lawn was there yet, was we depend on you. We're white guys. We did not experience what you experienced with some of the things, cultural things, but we don't know. And you have to help us with what we don't know. And that's one of the shows that came out was finding out about the whole thing of from Rosetta, particularly about the quilting. And so we, from the get go, I told the cast, if you don't tell us um, when we're violating uh, this premise of what it's like to be black in middle America. If you don't tell us, we won't know. So to a large extent, I think they believed me and did that. And so uh, so there's that feeling of, she's actually in a school. It's a real school. It's not the Jetsons high school. You know, real things happen in school. Shouldn't we do a show about this reality or that reality, even in the context of a show that's getting bigger than life? So that's where it came from.
What about more Black voices in the writers' room? I know you've had a few, like I believe Sarah Finney Johnson, Vita Spears, I think Steve Langford as well. Like, what?
Langford.
Yeah, what? Yeah, what was their conversations with those people of color as well as the cast?
Well, again, we had the same admonition to the writers of color also. You lived it. We didn't live it. We saw it. So we're depending on you. So, uh, um, and I mean, just to call back to my beginnings, way even before that,
Yeah.
it was years of me working in television before I ever met a Black comedy writer
Wow.
who even wanted to write uh, uh, television comedy. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't exist, I guess, but there it it was a white world, that television, up at least through the 70s. Um, then there was a time where there were a lot more black writers writing sitcom. So it opened up a whole door. So um, uh, it's like even now when the first full script I wrote, full half-hour script I wrote at Paramount was for a show that was all black. Uh, uh, the next series I was a writer producer on, Room 222, was a blended race cast.
Right.
Nobody ever questioned that. Nobody ever questioned that there were no black writers either.
And Family Matters?
No, Family Matters. That was no longer the case.
Right.
And it wasn't just that it was required for appearance sake. I know Michael and I took it very seriously that it's like also having women writers, which that did happen before writers of color showed up on writing staff. It wasn't that a writer can't write someone other than themselves. Uh, a male writer should be able to write a woman character. They just need to be smart about it and uh, understand how it's different and so forth. You're using your imagination, but you always want to. So anyway, I had experience with that, and now by the time Family Matters came along, it was not that it was an availability; it was a necessity, and not just for political purpose. You needed people. Well, it's like as I was saying, women writers. There's things from a woman's experience and point of view that I don't have access to because I didn't live it. I can read about it, I can see it, I can watch it, I can learn it. So you want a mix on a writing staff where people are bringing in their life perspective uh, as opposed to simply a writer's perspective trying to understand whatever characters you're writing.
Yeah. Now you had mentioned the quilt episode from season one being an example of writing to the black experience. Obviously, that was about Laura trying to sell her grandmother's family ancestry quilt to her grandmother's displeasure. I've heard stories. I want you
You're
to
good.
confirm
You're
if it's
good
true
at
or not.
this.
So, to the best of your
Got
memory,
homework.
do you know if the show was literally about to be canceled by that point? Because there seems to be this perception that ratings for the first 11 episodes were terrible, on the verge of cancellation, and then episode 12 of season one, Urkel comes in, and then all of a sudden you guys are saved. Is that true or not?
It's partly true. Um, uh, I don't remember, and I was there. I don't remember if the show was in trouble halfway through the first season. Uh, the networks always feel like the show is in trouble. Oh my God, we're not in the top 5. Well, I do not remember Family Matters being in danger. It was picked up, for initial orders are 13. It
Right.
was picked up for a full season, so we were hanging in there. So I don't remember the show being in trouble. Uh, I do remember the network saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," but they always say that. Uh, I never gave a flying flip about ratings. They were going to either be good or bad, and somebody was going to tell me one way or the other. And there was nothing I could do about affecting their fucking ratings.
Right.
Writing a show out of my head, trying to do the best I can. It, and that has nothing to do with how to make more people watch the show. I don't want to do that. Networks feel like if they can find the secret, and the networks are always wrong about the secret they find, that because it's unknowable. So I don't remember it being in trouble. It was not doing great. I do know that, and I do know that we had a meeting with the head of ABC, and I believe like January of the first season, or January, February, but early in the year, uh, as the show was and the meeting had been scheduled several weeks in advance, and so the head of ABC we were meeting with said, we need to find a breakout character. See, they think
Yeah.
it's something you can do, so
Yeah.
why don't you do it? And you know that if you say, you know what, that's pure accident, that won't make them happy. In this case, it was wonderful because he was saying, we got to add a breakout character. And when we say, we did that 2 months ago, look at the ratings. Character Steve Urkel added, ratings or a steady climb. And the meeting was over.
Wow.
So
I think, I mean, at least from what I saw online, you could dispute this if you want. The first 11 episodes pre Urkel, it seemed like they were averaging around 20 million viewers. So that really begs the question, what was considered good ratings back then? Because by today's standard, obviously, 20 million viewers, you could have a show on for
yeah,
50 something years because the audiences are so split and so niche now.
yeah.
So, I mean, I know you said you didn't give a flying flip about ratings, but did you have like a vague idea of what was like a network's perfect idea of a perfectly rated show?
Yeah, and of course the network's idea of it is excessive. It's fear based. So, like I said, they're not in the top five. So, on the other hand, Happy Days made it through 2 seasons, you know, struggling until the summer after the third season, when it went to number one. So, uh, you know, I've been around so long that I actually have had shows canceled that had 30 million viewers
Wow.
because three networks, it's before Fox.
Yeah.
That was all there was.
Yeah.
That and I think Mr. Rogers could be found or something
Yeah.
somewhere else, and PBS maybe, and then some local. No, it was three networks. Uh, so the audience divide was obviously different. Um, and that was in the process of changing in the early days of Family Matters, but it still wasn't what it became, obviously. So in we all knew if we actually faced reality, a show, good shows work, good shows fail, bad shows work, bad shows fail. No one knew why. No one could change that or affect that. So I never even asked what the ratings were. So that's one of the reasons I don't know what ratings were on a show. Was like, okay, if we're canceled, they'll give me a call.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a question about like the sort of meta wink wink moments that have happened in at least the first 2 seasons of our rewatch of the show. For example, the season one false arrest episode where Carl ends up having to arrest his family's favorite television star, Buddy Goodrich. And then you have scenes of the family watching Buddy Goodrich in his sitcom. And you see moments like the freeze frame at the end of the opening credits, things that would lead you to believe that you guys, as the family writers staff, like you guys were clearly satirizing the sitcom format as you're also genuinely doing it. Same thing happens with Good, Bad, and the Urkel, where like in the Western Dream sequence, there's like that dum 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 suspense music, and then you have all the Western characters looking around like, what is that? What is that? So I wonder if you had any thoughts about satirizing the sitcom format while also finding a way to just genuinely do it in other episodes, because I find it to be an interesting balance.
That's interesting. That's very perceptive. It may and I hadn't thought about it. A Western show. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes in the short, just the 1.5 seasons that I was head writer for the Partridge Family, um, was where they did a Western fantasy show, and it just made me laugh a lot. And they, when you say, okay, we're going to do a fantasy show, there are characters in the Old West. Well, then forget about the series. It's got nothing to do with that, right? Now and it's so much fun to do, especially after a show is established, and in the writers' room, you're making fun of your own show every night anyway. when it's silly, when it just really doesn't work. And at a writer's room, it's should never ever be recorded because that's when we're allowed to be our worst selves. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's such a release to do a fantasy show when you've been doing a series for a little while. Because you can make fun of yourself, you can make fun of your form, you can make fun of television, and it's like um, uh, uh, deep therapy. It's like doing a weekend seminar or taking whatever drugs they're doing now. It's like doing mushrooms or something over the weekend. Is to come back saying, I don't know where I went, but it sure feels good. Um, so I don't know. So it gives you a license to make fun of yourself, of everything you take so seriously, and you realize, oh no, 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 it's all the joke.
I love that. Do you remember the whole concept behind Getting By, the short-lived series that you did with Thelma Hopkins in like the 93-94 season? Was the genesis of that show based on Thelma not getting as much screen time anymore on Family Matters by that point and finding a new vehicle for her? Like what was like how did that happen? Because I know that happened like maybe around the fourth or fifth season of Family Matters was her getting her own show, Getting By. I just was curious about that.
And that's great because I feel like every time you ask, how did you decide to do?
I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so
Are
sorry.
you fucking kidding me? We didn't know what we were doing. Well, um, I don't recall that we had any intention of taking Telma off Family Matters. Um, we had a chance to do a show with Cindy Williams. Now, I had known Cindy way back in the happy days when she was doing Laverne and Shirley. Our production and writers' offices were all in the same building, and we knew each other. So, and quite frankly, Cindy and Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams were absolutely nightmare actors to work with, and they were notorious on the lot. Happy Days was notoriously a happy place.
Yeah.
So we used to torture each other with them. That's Cindy Williams. Now Cindy Williams becomes available. You want to do a series with Cindy Williams, and I think she's really talented. I was soon to discover uh, that she was not problematic at all. She was just serious. So the first attempt with Cindy was a show where she and her white husband and with white kids, white family, adopts a wayward black kid from the streets. Okay. So we write the pilot. We get to go ahead to shoot the pilot. We have the cast a network reading of the pilot. And all of a sudden, somebody's saying, no, that's inappropriate now because it's a white family adopting a black kid, and that's racist. So okay, well, so that pilot disappeared, but we still wanted to do something like that, and with Cindy. So that's where Getting By became uh, a kind of blended family. Cindy and her kid, Telma and her kid, and then we could use that fantastic young actor that we had in the pilot uh, that didn't go anywhere.
Right.
So that's a way to kind of do what we had in mind uh, with that brilliant kid who I think has passed away now as Telma's kid. Uh, so we thought, oh well, this would be interesting too. It's like two single women, and they each have a kid, and so it's a way to blend races, which is what we had wanted to do originally. But that's why we pulled Telma out of Family Matters, was to do that show.
Really? Okay.
And so I don't know if that lasted 2 seasons or 1 season. I don't remember.
I think it was one season. Okay, so I got the impression that Rachel was just kind of written off the show because she wasn't playing as much of a
You
role?
know, no, it's we had it wasn't let's find a place for Telma. It was kind of the opposite. It's like, let's do this new concept, and wouldn't it be great to have Telma do it with Cindy? Yeah.
Along with Perfect Strangers and Family Matters, another iconic TGIF show that you had a hand in was Step by Step. And my only question about that is, being a fan of Dallas, I have like 4 or 5 seasons on DVD. And maybe you've already answered this question by the fact that you said that you don't see like dramatic actor or comedic actor, you just see actor. But I guess the idea of Patrick Duffy coming out of like 13 years of this dramatic nighttime soap opera to a TGIF sitcom, like immediately, like the summer or fall after Dallas ended, fascinated me. So how did that conversation begin? Like, let's get Patrick Duffy, who is just coming from Dallas, and let's get him to Step by Step. That's a curious question that I had.
If I had thought like you back then, I might have been more successful.
No, no, no. You plenty
Okay, here,
successful.
almost everything in creating a television show and doing a television show is chaos. Uh, we we had at that point, Michael and I and Tom and Bob, we had uh, excluding Full House from the conversation because we weren't involved with that. Uh, we now the four of us had two shows running on network. Um, Family Matters and Perfect Strangers. And we were at that wonderful place where we didn't really have to sell the network on doing another series. We would go in kind of late in the process and tell them what series we were doing.
Mm.
It was great. It's just that's a very unusual and brief experiences in television. But so Michael and I wanted to do, well, probably Tom, wanted to do a blended family. We said that's kind of been done and done. We're always resistant. We're writers. No, I don't like it. Okay. Tom wants to do a blended family. And long as it's not like Brady Bunch, for God's sakes, said, okay. I think we wrote, yeah, I'm sure we wrote the pilot first. We didn't have Patrick. I don't think we even had Suzanne in mind, but it came to casting and Suzanne we knew. And of course she had done comedy shows. And so, that was an easy one. Then, Tom and Bob said, Patrick Duffy, because in Dallas, we were shooting on the same lot. Uh, I don't, somehow that makes us feel like we're related or something. So they said, Dallas is going off the air. Patrick Duffy for the husband father in the show. And Michael and I think in unison said, no, damn it. Can we please get somebody that's funny? So we resisted. By the way, Patrick later became one of my closest friends. So he knows this already. And then we had a meeting with Patrick face to face. Take a meeting with me. Okay, we'll meet him. So we spent some time, an hour in a meeting, and he was very funny in person, but we're still wary. And then how in the world this came about? We were given a gag reel from Dallas, one of the season of Dallas, and in the gag reel, Patrick just cuts up like a silly person.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that's jaw flexing Dallas thing
Yeah.
disappeared, and he just makes fun of himself and does. He was hilarious in the gag reel for the show. So we thought, okay, well, maybe we've judged him too quickly. It happens a lot. So that opened us up to Patrick, and so we said okay, and then we were wonderfully surprised with his comedic ability. Although for the run of the series, I used to fight with him for certain jokes he wanted to get in the series. And I said, no, that's too silly for sitcom. And,
Really?
uh, and I promised him I would find a places for some of those ridiculous Three Stooges level things. And I think for most of them, eventually I found a place for them. But so yeah, we were completely resist Patrick Duffy, and then we were glad that somebody sort of pushed our face into his face, and we realized, oh, not only did uh, was he funny, uh, but he, like I say, he also became a close friend. Without him, I would not have had that friend.
I love that. I love that. And I believe Family Matters and Step by Step, they both had the same like ending outcome, like once they wrapped up their time on TJIF. Because if I'm not mistaken, at the end of Family Matters 8th season, does ABC decide to cancel the show, or do you guys decide you want to go to CBS to create something else? How did that happen?
Well,
Along
the whole CBS thing was, I mean, the sitcom dream, which is also the nightmare, is that you voluntarily go out when you're on top. It's hard to do that. Nobody wants a series to end, and almost everybody I've ever known is shocked when it does. Although we know it's all temp work, it's going to end. So I think Family Matters and Step by Step had run their course, and they were getting harder to do because uh, it, we should have gone out probably in a season earlier. And so ABC was uh, not sure they wanted to do it. So that's how the CBS thing came about. Is we said, okay, ABC won't do it. We'll take it to CBS, where the former head of Warner Brothers Television had taken over the network, Les Moonves.
Yeah.
So Tom and Bob, who were the business brains of the thing, managed to sell it to CBS. That's how it was, just trying to hang on. We didn't get to, sort of ideal situation is you get to do a last episode and know it's the last episode.
Right.
Networks, however, they ordered however many they ordered that would complete the season, but then canceled the show a couple of episodes short of that. So all of a sudden, we we lost the opportunity to do final episodes, and so that's just the way TV goes. I'm amazed that it lasted even most of what's the final season.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that you guys didn't know that the final episode wasn't the final episode, because then I think it was Jaleel that said it in his recent Growing Up Urkel book that came out, that like there was hugging, there was tears after what ended up to be the final episode. So yeah, I don't even know. Like, so you're saying that the final episode that we saw, where Steve comes back from his NASA outer space mission, reunites with Laura and the family, like while you guys were shooting that, had no idea that you weren't coming back for a 10th season? Because
I'm not sure that that was the case with Family Matters. I could be wrong. That we knew it at that point, because we didn't find out like the day of the last show. I remember the discussion about last episode of Family Matters, uh, because I'm sure who else would have come up with it. Dave said he should go to outer space, and I said, but since we have that, what if we leave Steve Urkel in outer space, floating in space? I I came up with many last episodes over my career that were turned down, and that one was turned down. We have to bring it back to Earth. And I thought, no, let him float in space. Steve Urkel, he lives there. So just like at the last episode of Happy Days, my pitch to Garry, which was turned down. I said, the last episode, because it was about a wedding, Joni and Chachi get married. It was so cynical writers. It's like, and so, okay, okay. At the end of the episode, the family goes out in the backyard for the wedding. House is empty. We hear the sound of a basketball bouncing, and brother Chuck, who disappeared after season 2, comes down the stairs and says, "Where'd everybody go?" I thought that was wonderful, and he enjoyed it. But I always thought last episode should hell, go for something, be silly.
Yeah, I mean that famous last episode of Bob Newhart's second sitcom,
Oh,
where
which is the
yeah,
best series ending ever.
yeah, where he wakes up from a
Yeah,
dream,
great.
character of his previous sitcom, and there you go. It was kind of a breaking the fourth wall kind of thing. It was wonderful. So I wonder, and again, I'm kind of going from what Jaleel White has said in interviews. I wonder if Family Matters moving from ABC to CBS. I wonder if part of it was because uh, in the mid '90s, ABC was bought by Disney. Family Matters was still on ABC, but it was a Warner Brothers own show. So maybe like that sort of ownership conflict is what made ABC gradually not want to commit as much to Family Matters as, say, their other TGIF shows that were maybe more owned by ABC Disney, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, etc. Any part in that, or was it just simply like the ratings and the momentum was gone?
I'm not saying that couldn't have been a factor,
Right.
but quite frankly, the ratings are slipping, and uh, I never was shocked that ABC wanted to cancel it. Um, but there was a lot that went down when Disney bought ABC, and it affected us too. We had a series that actually was on ABC's schedule, and then Eisner went in the room and said, "No, take these new shows off and put my Disney shows back on." So it was always incestuous in that regard. But that was a good deal. I think that was a while before Family Matters ended. So I don't know if that was part of it or not. All I It was seemed clear to me. ABC, the ratings had been slipping. It was time for the show to go, and ABC wanted to cancel it. And Tom and Bob went to the CBS to Les and said, "Hey, you want to buy a show?" And they did. Uh, Disney may have been a factor. Who knows? Show business is a strange business.
Yeah. And Family Matters goes to CBS.
Jaleel, and I'm actually reading Jaleel's book, and I because even I haven't finished it, but he does get some things wrong because I know behind the scenes what was actually happening. But I found it fascinating because the actors, uh, the writers and producers, and the executive producers, we all have certain things we know that the other part doesn't know. There's all kinds of stuff, that interaction that happens on the set, that as the bosses or the executive producer, uh, that kind of power fences you out. Nobody's really fully themselves when you go to the set,
Right.
because you could fire them, theoretically. Um, so there's a lot of infighting and stuff that we're never exposed to. Uh, and behind the scenes stuff, uh, it's always a mix of who knows. So I'm fascinated reading Jaleel's book to find out what his experience was, what his
Yeah.
perception. You know, I remember what I remember. I'm telling you things like I guarantee this is the real story. I could be wrong. Uh, so anyway, I wanted to see Jaleel's experience because he was a trooper. He's a terrific actor, and that kid, starting at 12 years old, that's his
Mhm.
entire youth on that show.
Yeah.
It was not easy for that young man, and he handled it, he handled it better than any actor I've ever seen handle what he had to deal with. And I will give tremendous credit to his parents.
Yeah.
A lot of kids. So that means I've also, might say, worked with a lot of kid actors' parents. And for the most part, uh, I have been disappointed in the parents. And occasionally there are amazing parents. Ron Howard had amazing parents, and so did Jaleel.
And do you feel comfortable naming any particular actors' parents that were not great? I know Jaleel in his book, he mentioned some not so great things about, Jamie Foxworth, Judy Winslow,
Yeah.
her mom. He had some opinions about the way her mom treated.
And, he probably has a good deal more insight than I do
Right,
because, again, when you're the boss, so to speak, people behave differently
right,
around. So you don't always know. Um, but the two you mentioned, I would concur. Um, uh, and of course, there's in between. Uh, there's some parents that, and now I've forgotten, on Hanging with Mr. Cooper.
another show he worked on. Yeah,
I can't remember that sweet actor's name, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was. We had meetings with her parents. She's a child, and the parents were taking her on tour to make appearances all weekend. So she's working all week, and then her parents have got her on the road, uh, you know, doing stuff all weekend, and we met with them to say, "Please, you're don't do this to your child."
yeah,
The way all of our childhood, it's enough that a kid is on a series and is special everywhere they go for several years of their childhood, and then all of a sudden that ends.
yeah.
That ends. All of a sudden, the
Yeah,
whole way the world relates to them ends. And I saw it with Danny Bonaducci on Partridge Family and so many times. I've worked with so many children, doing family shows. I've seen it happen so much. It's very tragic how parents, feed off their children sometimes. And again, there were some that were not so bad and some that were more toward the good line. I mentioned Jaleel's parents and Ron's parents because they were exceptional. Doesn't mean the others were bad, but as a parent, it's hard on a kid to actually be a TV star for a while because it almost never continued. Ron was unemployable after the Andy Griffith Show until Graffiti came back.
so what have you been up to since the end of the TGIF days?
Well, I'll never stop working. It's the only job I ever wanted, and it's the only job I've ever had. Um, right now, I'm developing a limited series based on the life of Gladys Knight. That's right, white guy's doing it again. Um, and uh, I became friends with Gladys. And she asked me if I would do her life story, and it's a powerful life story, and I'm thrilled about doing it. So we're developing that. Hopefully that will appear on television one of these days.
I love that. I love everything about Gladys Knight. So that's gonna be
I mean,
something
her
I'm.
story shocked me. I mean, I don't think I had realized that she, uh, uh, won what basically is, one of those American Idol type shows back in the early 50s, the Ted Mack, amateur hour,
Yeah,
at 7 years old. I think she turned 8 the day she won it, and, so from that time on, she, my god, she was still a child when she was touring the Jim Crow South in the early '50s, and now I was growing up in the deep South in the early '50s, and the idea of a kid on her own, with they had big, touring groups were, some big superstars and lesser ones and things like that, but they were groups of performers that toured, and stuff, and here is this little girl from that age, her first exposure to, the South that I remember quite well. Um, I was shocked, and that from then on, she had this amazing career and, very much like Michael Jackson and very much like, uh, who she was friends with and very much like, a very close mentor, Sammy Davis Jr., uh, their talent, basically robbed them of a childhood,
yeah.
say it's in a good way, because it was based on they were so talented that they just skipped over a very formative, period of their lives. Well, that was Gladys's story, so that that's what captivated me. and then her life story, the ups and downs. I knew none of that, and and ultimately found family, which I feel like she was searching for. Uh, Met William McDowell, who's her husband now, who's a good friend and a fabulous guy. Anyway, I felt it was inspiring, and of course, not only does her music track my life and many others who are not as old as me, um, but also her story tracks civil rights in America. My God, from being out in that world in 1952, I think, uh, all the way through Detroit riots and all that. That's all the background of her life, and here's her music threading through all that history. She's just a terrific lady. That's my promo. I never can stop talking when I start
No,
talking
no, no, you're good. You're good. I mean, I cannot
about
wait
her
to see
story.
that. Is there like a website or social media that people can follow you at to keep in touch with what you're doing?
No, I've never been interested in in every day saying, "Let's see, what can I tell them about myself today?" No, I don't. I'm just trying to make these things happen so other people can see the stories. I'm not interested in my story is only my story.
Hey, I mean, the work that you do clearly speaks for itself. So I really thank you for speaking with me, Bill Bickley, and I wish all the best for you. Thank you. I mean, this is
Thank you,
great.
and to you too. And I like I tried to express very badly in a quick email. Um, it's such a pleasure to speak with someone who's intelligent and who is well informed. I've spoken with a lot of people who are not so, and it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah,
See now, when somebody interviews me like you,
yeah,
stimulating, then
yeah.
it makes me think. It makes, and of course, all of my answers are entirely dependent on what I thought happened.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily tell you everything about what did happen. This is the map of my memory.
Thank you so much for your time, man.
I thank you too for a great experience.
Wonderful. All right, take care. Have a great rest of your day.